Hello there, it's Lily, and today I'm going to be talking about a book that I read a couple weeks back, Animal Farm by George Orwell. Now, I apologize for any mistakes in my speech at the moment, since I am really tired because I stayed up way too late last night working and prepping for this project, and also watching Mrs. Doubtfire. Alright, now this book is unusual because it's less of a story than a political allegory and a criticism of Stalin's Russia during a time when no one wanted to hear it. The novella was published shortly after World War II, even though it had been written during World War II, and since the U.S. and England and all of the Allies were currently buddies with Russia to fight against Nazi Germany, no one wanted to hear anybody spewing any crap about Stalin. So everybody, all the editors, told George Orwell, "Nuh-uh, we ain't publishing this book. You've got to be crazy or something." That's a terrible idea. And of course, shortly after World War II, we entered the long phase of tension between the Allies and Russia, or the Western and Eastern blocs, known now as the Cold War, which Orwell pretty much predicted. So now his book Animal Farm, the prediction of that tension, is a classic. The story begins with a farm run by a sleazy, alcoholic, and neglectful farmer named Mr. Jones. The oldest boar on the farm, Major, calls an animal meeting and gives a rousing speech calling all of the other little farmyard animals to revolution against the humans. Now, Major himself has led a pretty sweet and good life as a prize-winning fair boar, but the rest of the animals have been abused and treated awfully by the farmer, who is too drunk to remember to feed them. So Major basically teaches them a bunch of songs about how humans suck. I'm not kidding, that actually happens in the book, and tells them to revolt. Then, shortly afterwards, he dies of old age. Major, despite being a prize-winning pig in the book, is a metaphor for not only Karl Marx, the man who came up with many of the founding ideas of socialism, but also Vladimir Lenin, who was the person who incited the Russian Revolution, both of whom were people that George Orwell saw in a mainly positive light and looked up to. So Major is hence portrayed as a fairly positive character, despite a few little flaws in his speech that make you wonder about his true intentions. A while after Major is dead, two other pigs, Napoleon and Snowball, turn Major's ideas into a complete system of thought called animalism, and stir the other animals to the point where they actually revolt and kick Mr. Jones out of the farm along with his family, taking it for themselves. Now, Snowball and Napoleon actually represent Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin, the two main leaders of Soviet Russia after the multiple revolutions around 1917 that would lead to it becoming a communist state. Mr. Jones is Orwell's representation of Tsar Nicholas II, who was not very well liked by the people in general, and especially not well liked by those who thought that socialism was a better idea than the monarchy that was going on at the time. An arrangement is reached in which the animals hold regular meetings on Sundays to vote on farm affairs. They will also spend the rest of that day resting. This arrangement works out well for them, and enough work is done that Manor Farm, now renamed Animal Farm, flourishes. However, some of the wiser animals begin to notice that the pigs, who are all close comrades of Napoleon and Snowball, are beginning to secret away milk and apples, the hard-earned fruits of all of the animals' labor, for themselves, claiming that they need it to power their brains, since they are obviously the smartest animals on the farm. Now, this is an important turning point in the story, because the milk and apples in Orwell's metaphor represent money and power, and the pigs taking the money and power, milk and apples, away from the other animals and using it for their own needs is supposed to be a metaphor for Stalin and Trotsky and the rest of their buddies taking away the money and freedom and power from the other citizens of Russia. Obviously, Orwell did not think that this was a very good thing because this is portrayed in a pretty negative light in Animal Farm. The pigs, who have learned to read and write, paint the 7 Commandments of Animalism, written by Snowball, onto the barn wall. Snowball attempts to teach the other animals literacy, but only 2, Muriel the elderly goat and Benjamin the cynical donkey, get past their ABCs. Napoleon takes some small puppies away from their mother and raises them, educating them in isolation from the rest of the animals on the farm. Next, Snowball begins plans for a windmill, which he explains will make life much easier on the farm and reduce the work week considerably. This is meant to represent the various 5-year plans going on in Russia, none of which succeeded very much. Napoleon, however, gets his metaphorical panties in a bunch and sends the puppies, now a terrifying squad of guard dogs, to chase Snowball off the farm under threat of death by angry puppies who have turned into monsters. As soon as his rival is gone, Napoleon takes credit for the windmill idea and makes the animals begin work on it right away, while spreading myths and propaganda about how Snowball was in league with the humans all along. He uses his new power as the sole leader to become the dictator of Animal Farm, abolishing the weekly meetings and replacing them with a committee of pigs to rule over the rest of the animals. He executes several creatures to demonstrate his power, and the pigs begin living in the Joneses' old farmhouse, also enjoying other human-like luxuries. Napoleon has one of his minion pigs change the 7 Commandments of Animalism, like so, in order to excuse his human-like behavior. The pigs even begin to drink whiskey. The other animals continue to slave away at the windmill, hoping it will become complete so that they can have a little bit of rest. After some drama involving a couple of human farmers, Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick, who represent England and Germany respectively, Hitler metaphor, or Mr. Frederick, blows up the windmill that the animals have slaved over, along with paying Napoleon for a bunch of wood with bank forgeries. So I guess it's springtime for Hitler? Eh? Eh? No? Okay. 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 No one ever gets my Broadway jokes, I swear to God. It's just... ugh. Napoleon is pissed as heck and makes the animals work even harder, resulting in the injury of a dutiful and innocent, but ignorant and aging workhorse named Boxer. Napoleon tells the rest of the animals that he has sent for a veterinarian to heal Boxer, but in reality, he's called a knacker to take Boxer away and make him into glue. Boxer is also the only friend of Benjamin the cynical donkey, which is going to be important later. Benjamin, the cynical donkey from earlier that we discussed, is the only one to be able to read the lettering on the knacker's cart. He tries and fails to rescue Boxer. Finally, the pigs complete their descent into humanity as they begin to carry whips, wear clothes, and even walk upright. The 7 Commandments of Animalism painted on the barn are replaced by one phrase. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The other barn animals spy on a dinner party between the pigs and the neighboring farmers, aka England metaphor and his men. This is when all of the other animals realize they can no longer distinguish between pig and human. The story ends on an ominous note, with Napoleon and Mr. Pilkington playing an ace of spades at the same time, hinting at the conflict between England and Russia to come. Now, from this story, one might think that Orwell was a socialist-hating conservative, but he actually identified as a social democrat himself. In a preface for a Ukrainian edition of Animal Farm, he is even quoted as stating, "For the past 10 years, I have been convinced that the destruction of the Soviet myth was essential if we wanted a revival of the socialist movement. On my return from Spain, I thought of exposing the Soviet myth in a story that could be easily understood by almost anyone, and which could be easily translated into other languages." He was a socialist. He was a democratic socialist. He did not hate socialism. Get your facts straight, English teachers. Fun fact, the original title of Animal Farm was Animal Farm, a fairy story. Because, you know, every little kid wants to hear stories about tyranny, brutality, evil pigs, and murder. That's what little girls are made of. Fun fact, too. George Orwell was so determined that people understand Animal Farm as an allegory for Soviet Russia that when it was translated into French, he actually suggested that the title should be a title which would be abbreviated to URSA, or Ursa, which is the Latin word for bear, which is a symbol of Russia. He was that desperate. Animal Farm!